Hello, I'm Melanie Mitchell, and I'm a biological sciences major. And today I'm going to be rhetorically analyzing two artifacts addressing health disparities. To begin, I have my non-text based artifact, which is a video poem by Darius Simpson titled The Color of COVID. I'm going to play a short clip. Sorry.
COVID 19 shook the world to its core, or kicked up a familiar dust, or coughed up what's been resting in the diaphragm of the United States for centuries. Coronavirus broke headlines as a global pandemic while 2020 was still getting its bearings. You might think, in a time of social distancing, while many of us face an issue that is incapable of discriminating, that we are finally in this together. Yet, there are communities who are more drastically impacted, even by a virus that promises nothing except that it is equally contagious regardless of skin color.
If you do have the time to watch the rest, it truly is a beautiful video, but I'm going to first analyze and discuss the author, genre, purpose, and conventions. So the author, Darius Simpson, he is an African-American male and a poet activist who received his BA in political science. He may be especially familiar or even impacted himself being African-American, or he just may have a personal related purpose, therefore influencing his rhetoric. The genre, being video poem, is unique because it combines voice and video into a powerful message. So we see the effects of rhythm on the conception of this message. For example, as coronavirus is spoken, the word in newspaper font and in like almost screenshots of different headlines is displayed to invoke reminders of this time and the emotions that were brought with it, which plays into the pathos that I'll discuss later. Visual depictions in combination with spoken word also invokes a lot of pathos. For example, when it says equally contagious regardless of skin color, it shows people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds simultaneously. And this presentation of information is extremely intentional to the author's purpose, and even the organizational aspects of the video are extremely intentional. The conventions used are stressors, pauses, and enunciation. For example, when the word coughed up is used, there's actually a cough sound in the background. He also uses contrasting words to juxtapose and create a stronger emotional appeal. He says, shook the world to its core or kicked up a familiar dust. And then he also says that we are finally in this together, yet there are more communities drastically impacted. And this stimulates biases and triggers this historical illusion as well that illuminates emotions in the audience as these are being compared. Lastly, he also uses rhetorical questions, and he actually ends with this, which I thought was important to note, to spark awareness and conversation. He says, how might we even the playing field? Where are the gaps and needs? Which humans have access to which healthcare? And these questions don't exactly expect an answer, but they trigger an internal response for the audience and trigger their emotions, which brings me right into rhetorical appeals. Ethos, he uses headlines from credible news sources such as the New York Times, and this induces familiarity with the audience and also credibility. Also, YouTube is a platform that anyone can post videos, but the particular channel that he uses has 23,000 subscribers. Next, into pathos, he uses persuasion using emotions, and it's very deliberate. There's a video of a little kid without a kitchen table, and for me personally, it evoked feelings of guilt and reminded me of my own privilege, which goes into his purpose. And his purpose is just to raise awareness and to highlight the disparities that COVID-19 has caused. And he also represents a lower socioeconomic class. He mentions is if the safest place is inside, what are the people without us in inside? And while he says this, he shows a clip of a homeless person. And as we know, African American populations are facing higher socioeconomic disadvantages, which enhance their susceptibility and vulnerability to contracting this disease and having pre-existing conditions that make them more vulnerable. Um, Also, he includes headlines like Black businesses bear the brunt of the pandemic, which invokes these feelings of heartache and sorrowfulness. And He also has a video of an essential worker saying she had one shift where she saw 84 patients, and this provides insight into how this issue has affected someone's life in particular, which is also a form of ethos and credibility as well. And lastly, logos, which is difficult to do in a video poem. He mentions many statistics and even shows a pie chart shown at the end. He mentions mortality rates being 6.7 times higher for African Americans and 2.5 times for the Latinx community, and this appeals to the audience's reasoning and logic. Some of the constraints of this is that there is a lack of ethos, being that credibility is hard to include in non-text sources in general, but particularly in this video poem. Also, the genre itself, it just has many challenges, like I mentioned before. And the culture of the audience, they may not be American. They may not understand these historical allusions that this historical situations and context that he's alluding to. And racism and health disparities in America are just simply a different beast than they are in other countries. And YouTube being an international platform means that our audience is very likely to be, not from the U.S. And also the time of the argument, relevancy is a big form of exigence here. And, someone watching this video in 2025 may not, be influenced by the author's purpose as much as someone watching it in 2021 or 2022. Next, I'm going to analyze a research study called Health Disparity in COVID-19, a Retrospective Analysis. And this study analyzed various factors that triggered health disparity in the U.S., but it focuses also in particular in a second study on the state of Mississippi, which suffers from extreme health disparity. And the purpose is to propose an explanation here, but also prove a correlation between race and the impact, and also to hopefully find effective solutions. So the authors are listed in an organized format that also has their key field of work in the department that they are a part of. And this genre being a peer-reviewed article, I found it from the FSU library database, means that it's written by experts, but also therefore reviewed by several experts in the field before it's published. So this provides great source of credibility, knowing that this has been supported by experts. Also, it's formal. The grammar and punctuality is in a formal manner, but also not too formal, so the average, person can still understand it without having a great background on medical terminology. And the paragraphing is set up in a traditional scientific literature format, which is great for the audience to clearly understand. There's an abstract of results and methods, and it would be easy for any reader to take what they need and use this source to support the fact that health disparities are disproportionately affecting African Americans. Next, the exigence and context. Like I said before, the time, the data is of relevancy, so the recency of this data is a form of exigence and context within itself, because the researchers are clearly seeing disproportionate data from the CDC, which they actually include, and they're moved to find an explanation and solutions. And also, historical context is extremely important to note for both of these sources, in fact, and that health disparity has been suggested as one of the many factors responsible and in COVID-19. And next, rhetorical appeals. Ethos is very strong, and there's a list of credentials. There's even funding from the NIH and citations from the CDC. Pathos is lacking a little bit, and that's with any research study. There is a lack of, emotional appeal. However, the way that they frame the scientific data clearly shows that there are certain communities who are being, more impacted than others, which does appeal emotionally to the audience. And they also talk about, diseases and death, which, sparks an emotional response in readers. And then logos, there's use of graphs. The peer-reviewed articles typically really have great logos, but Figure 1 shows an analysis of pre-existing health conditions. And it actually visually depicts this with like shading and coloring. And the coloring shows strong prevalence, and this appeals to me in particular, but to the general audience for visual reasoning and logic, where I'm easily and clearly able to see, wow, African Americans are being more impacted than white individuals here, Caucasian individuals. And there are constraints, like I said, the lack of pathos, but also in the second study, there potentially is a lack of representation because it does focus on Mississippi, which is a highly racially polarized area, and it's actually the ranked as the most obese state in the US. So this can be seen as an extreme representation. However, the study does cover all of the US in its other study. And also the genre just does limit the audience, being that I found it on the FSU library database. And yeah, that is my rhetorical analysis of both of my sources.